Hey, this is the World Advice Channel 2. What I want to talk about today is the problem with HasanAbi. So for this video, I will explain in a simple and straightforward way the problem with HasanAbi, when it comes to his worldview and his way of thinking, and not just the problem with his worldview and his way of thinking, why it's an example of why the left wing is not doing well these days, okay? And why the right wing is winning. And as a result, hopefully this video will educate people the problem with his way of thinking. So of course the right doesn't continue to win, which they've been winning actually more and more nowadays. And the left can start becoming more powerful again. So we can of course, become able to live in a more progressive world for that, okay? And that is why I'm going to be talking about this topic today. So now that I mentioned that, let's get started. So when it comes to the problem with HasanAbi, the problem with HasanAbi, okay, is he's a representation of everything wrong with the modern left, okay? Whether it could be down to his views on how the economy should be run, since he's a socialist, or it could be his views on, media and stuff like wokeness, all that type of stuff, and how people should be portrayed in media, yada, 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 yada. You get the point. That whole topic about wokeness and all that type of stuff, you get the point. Like, this whole identity politics stuff that you hear about all the time on the internet, things like that are the reason why the modern left is losing everywhere. Whether it could be North America, Europe, even Asia, things like that is the reason why they are losing, okay? So let me explain for the first point of my two main points when it comes to discussing the two biggest problems with HasanAbi's ways of thinking, So let me get started with the first one, which of course is identity politics, okay? The truth and identity, okay? What is offensive and what is not offensive, okay? Because as I'm certain for anyone who's on the internet, I am really certain, definitely more certain than not, you are familiar with, of course, the whole topic of cancel culture, this whole issue with people getting offended by every and anything, like you might have a character who's the main villain for a movie, he's black, so people are saying, oh, so what you're trying to say, black people are evil, or people might make a simple joke about, maybe, some particular group of people, like a rabbit or something, and they get offended, or something like that, whatever, you get the point. There's so many videos about it, it's ridiculous. So I don't even think I have to explain it to you in full detail, okay? The truth of the matter is when it comes to that whole topic, the truth is there is something known as drawing, okay? When it comes to media, okay? And not just for media, but for anything, okay? Which means there's a limit to how far you can take things, and if you take it below that line, that's when it becomes a problem, okay? Because the thing is, as a black person myself, I have to admit myself, okay, as a left-wing black person, not one of those bullshit right-wing black people, okay? The Uncle Toms, a lot of them, on the real, I ain't gonna front though, are Uncle Toms, okay? The truth is, when it comes to media, especially comedy, specifically comedy, okay, I don't think there's a problem with making jokes about black people or making maybe comments or critiques of it, especially when you take into consideration that overall, the point of media in general, specifically comedy, is to pretty much, a lot of times is to satirize the world or make political statements about the world and all that type of stuff, okay? That is the truth of the matter about the media, okay? And even though sometimes it might come off a certain way, it's actually meant to come off that way because it's trying to get a message. Like they might depict maybe something a certain particular way, but they're trying to get a message out there, okay? There's a difference, and that's what I'm trying to get at here, when it comes to things like that, okay? Like if you make a joke about black people, like, okay, why are black people so good at basketball, because they're all tall or whatever, just a few things that are kind of very silly and stuff. I might not necessarily personally be the biggest fan of it, but when it comes to the topic, of course, of freedom of speech, for freedom of speech to continue to exist, like, what's the big deal about it? Because the point of media in general, when you look at the media in general, they make fun of everyone. And the more we obviously try to focus on things like that, like offensive, that's offensive. It just pretty much creates a situation where no one can really say anything about anyone or something or anything. And some of the things, even aside from the silly jokes here and there, are just simply stupid. Like the point I made before about, just randomly putting two and two together about black people. Like, oh, a black person's the main character, and he's a villain. Okay, this is racist, and it's calling every and anything racist. Like they might just simply have a character who wears chains and is black and say that's racist, and that's what I'm talking about. People like HasanAbi get offended by things like that. That's so stupid, and that's what I'm trying to say. Because to explain my point in further detail, there's a difference between something that's mild versus something that's genuinely offensive. Blackface is offensive. Okay? That is generally offensive and should never be put out there. Versus something like making a simple joke where they make a simple joke about black people. Oh, well, black people like this or black people like that. When you also realize they make jokes about white people and other races of people. Okay, and that's what I'm referring to when it comes to the topic of drawing. That is what I'm referring to. And that's what people like HasanAbi don't seem to understand. And that's why they get offended by everything and get so pissed at everything. Because they make a big scene about things that don't really freaking matter, which just makes it more likely people will say, okay, so you're going to get offended by everything? Okay, now I'm just going to vote for the right wing anyway. And that's so stupid. And that's one of my first problems with HasanAbi, okay? Is that he just creates a situation, to sum up what I'm trying to say here, where where it just makes it more likely people will get turned off because people can't do anything anymore without it somehow being offensive to some group or this and that of people, versus realizing what is actually offensive versus what's not offensive. And that's my first point. My second point is his political views on the economy and stuff like that, okay? That is also my second thing I'm going to cross here, if anything, to be honest with you. The economy shit. That shit is so stupid, okay? This whole communist thing, okay? And I'm saying this, okay? And I'm not hating on HasanAbi, because I'm saying it because, obviously I want the best for the world in general. And HasanAbi in general, I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's probably a smart guy, even a pretty decent guy. Even though he shot-collared his dog and stuff. I don't know. Maybe he is. But he's definitely a pretty smart guy, but he's definitely, being misled. And when it comes to this whole communist way of thinking, communism, as history shows, does not work. History has shown this numerous freaking times. Communism has not worked and will never work. And especially when you look at the history of it, it just further proves it even more. And even just the ideology itself doesn't make any sense. Because the whole point of human beings in general, aside from us just of course, existing, for that matter, being the most smartest being on the planet, is for us to always evolve, always develop. Communism is against that. Communism doesn't believe in human beings developing more and more, because it takes away one of the fundamental elements and encourages growth, rewards. You do this, you do that, you will get this, you will get that, you will get this, you will get that. Communism is against that, because communism believes that money and fame and stuff is a sign of decadence and all this type of crap. That's what it believes in. So how are we going to develop and evolve and become a better species, a more powerful species, and just in general live a much more enjoyable life, when you rob people of one of the biggest things that will motivate them to, of course, go higher? That's what I'm trying to say. And that's what communists have never been able to explain. And that's the second biggest problem with HasanAbi's way of thinking, is that his economic belief system doesn't work, and it never will work. So that's the truth of the matter of what I'm trying to get at here. So those are the two main problems with HasanAbi when it comes to his way of thinking. And just in general, for the last point for this video, the conclusion, of course, things like that is the reason why the left wing is losing nowadays, and why the right wing is becoming more and more powerful, because of those freaking ways of thinking. So what I'm going to just give a conclusion for this video is that if people in the left stop thinking that type of way and focus on things that matter, like, for example, holding media that actually is racist accountable, and actually focusing on having better regulation, or in other words, restrictions, so there's not government corruption, so we don't have to worry about capitalism, of course, destroying everything, then the left wing would be a lot more powerful and successful than it is. Instead of the right wing taking over like it has in recent years. That's what the left should focus on. All these things like identity politics and communism being the answer is not what they should focus on, for that matter. And the more they do that, the more they will alienate themselves from, of course, mainstream society, making it more likely that they, of course, will not win elections and the racists will win. The right wingers, to put it bluntly, the powerful ones especially. So that is exactly why I'm against HasanAbi's ways of thinking, and that is why the left is going to have to change. And this is what I have to say for my video, and this is it. And simply put, I'm out.